Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, reading Quran, taking advantage of the opportunity to learn Quran. Maybe some of us don't know how to read Quran or read the Arabic. You know, take advantage of the time when we come to the masjid to remember that we're in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's enough confusion and chaos and chatter going on in the outside world. We don't want to come here and find the same chatter. So when we come, you see, respect the rights of the masjid, the rights of the worshippers who are here, to read Quran, to make dhikr, to make dua, to make the salah, and keep the useless talk, or the vain talk about dunya very, very minimum, unless it's absolutely necessary, inshallah ta'ala. Among the benefits of Istiqama, as mentioned in the ayat we read, is having the support of the angels in the akhirah, in this life as well as in the akhirah. Walhamdulillah rabbil alameen. And for us as Muslims, we know it is from our aqidah to believe in the reality of Allah's malaika. These are not just some fanciful creatures of our imagination or that are talked about in the Quran and in Sunnah, but they have no presence in our lives. These are very real creatures that exist. Each of us has two recording angels, one recording our good deeds, one recording our bad deeds. So we should acknowledge that. We should know at the time of the death, it's a very harsh and difficult time. If we have been upon Istiqama, we have lived a life based upon La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send those angels to give us glad tidings of the promise of Jannah, when we will have all that the soul desires. Alhamdulillah. Allah will be pleased with those who have remained steadfast in His deed, and will shower them with blessings, inshallah ta'ala. We pray that Allah will make us of those who are steadfast in His deed. Ameen. The requirements to attain Istiqama is that we have to, first and foremost, perform the obligatory ibadah. We have to perform and be constant in upholding the fara'id ibadah, the acts of worship that Allah has made compulsory upon us. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, that Allah azza wa jalla said, that whoever shows animosity, hatred to a friend of mine, that I will be at war with him. Allahu Akbar. This statement alone should be enough of a support and encouragement and enthusiasm for the believer to know that we have the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to defend us against those who may hate us, who may hate Islam, who may hate the Muslim, who may hate the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that Allah, He will be at war with them. And then He says that my slave does nothing more beloved to me than the performance of the obligatory acts of worship. So if we want to be upon Istiqama, we must first make sure that we establish our regular ibadah, the 5 daily prayers. You see, the obligatory prayers, the obligatory zakat. If we are in the category, the eligible category that will require us to pay the zakat, we are to observe the obligatory fasting in Ramadan, and to make sure to make Hajj as soon as we can. That pillar in particular, many of us, unfortunately, we wait. Some Muslims wait until they're up in age and they can't do much traveling. Maybe they hope that they can go to Mecca to die there, to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certainly that's a great honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone goes on Hajj and Allah calls them back on Hajj, they go straight to Jannah, alhamdulillah. But we can't put off making Hajj. If Allah gives us the means to make Hajj, then it's a sin to actually neglect it or to make an excuse not to go, if He gives you the means. So we have to protect the obligatory acts of worship, because these are the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He said, my slave draws near to me by the performance of the nawafil acts, the supererogatory acts, the acts above and beyond the call of duty, the sunnah acts, alhamdulillah. So we are encouraged to pray the nafil prayer. How many of you would like to have a palace in Jannah? I'm sure we should raise both hands, because all of us would like to have a palace in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. One of the ways to attain that palace in Jannah is to pray the 11 sunnah rak'ah, during the course of the day. I think it's 11 or is it 12? I don't know, I lose count sometimes. The 2 before the 5 Fajr, the 4 before the Dhuhr, and the 2 after, that's 6, 8, and then the 2 after Maghrib, that's 10, and 2 after Isha, that's 12. So whoever prays the 12 rak'ah in the course of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will build for them a palace in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. Also praying Salatul Witr. It's highly recommended. So much so that the Prophet said, whoever abandons witr, he's not from my ummah. It doesn't mean that it's far, but it's very, very strong. It's a sunnah muwakkada. It's a stressed sunnah to pray, even if it's just 1 rak'ah before Fajr. You see, we should make a habit of getting up in the last third of the night when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down from his throne to see which of his slaves are seeking his forgiveness, which of his slaves are beseeching him for whatever we may need. So, inshallah ta'ala, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make us of those who practice the optional acts, the nawafil acts, so that we may earn the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, when we do that, He loves us. And when He loves us, He becomes our eyes with which we see, our ears with which we hear, our hands with which we strike or grasp, and our feet with which we walk. Now, we have to clarify. That doesn't mean that you see what Allah sees or you hear what Allah hears. No. It means that we will only look at what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will turn our eyes away from what displeases Allah. We will only listen to what pleases Allah, and we will turn our ears away from what displeases Allah. We will not let our hands touch what Allah has forbidden, or made haram or unlawful. We will not let our feet take us where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made unlawful. Because there will come a time when our body parts are going to speak against us, and we will not be able to tell our body parts to shut up. Our hands are going to say, did you see what He made me do? Our eyes will say, did you see what He made me look at? Our tongue will say, did you see what He made me, did you hear what He made me say? Our ears will say, did you hear what He made me listen to? And we will not be able to tell those body parts to be quiet. So, inshallah ta'ala, if we learn the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will become the hearing by which we hear, the seeing by which we see, the hands by which we grasp and strike, and the feet by which we walk, then indeed we will be surrounded by the protection of Allah. And he concluded this hadith Qudsi by saying that if my slave asks for anything, I will grant it for him. If my slave asks for protection, I will give it to him. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We must exert ourselves with full enthusiasm and vigor in performing the ibadah, not in a manner of laziness or lackadaisicalness. You see a nonchalance, just going through the motions. When we make our salah, or when we're doing any of the ibadah, whether it be fasting or giving zakat, making hajj, reading Quran, making dhikr, doing good deeds, giving good compliments, or helping one another, we should do it with enthusiasm and with the niyyat al-ikhlas, that is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the requirements of Istiqama is that we have to restrain ourselves from the unlawful deeds. We have to shun the commission of ma'asi, of the sin, the big sins and the minor sins. And we have to guard against the minor sins. Oftentimes we take for granted. You see the small sins that we commit. If the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they were very, very careful to avoid even the minor sins, because they knew that just like the munafiq, the hypocrites, or the disbelievers, when they commit a minor sin, they regard it as nothing more than like a fly to be shooed away from their nose. But when the believer commits a minor sin, it feels like the weight of a mountain on him. So we have to be very, very careful. As the Prophet warned us, that the commission of minor sins is just like the people who gather firewood, and they bring pieces of wood all together to build a big fire, enough to cook the whole meal. And that's how the minor sins can destroy the community, if we all are negligent and unmindful of these small acts of sin, of disobedience. We have to be careful to act upon the basis of knowledge. We have to make sure that what we do according to Islam is based upon sound knowledge. As Imam Mutahhir mentioned, that knowledge is the iman of action. And it is absolutely necessary and incumbent upon us to acquire the correct knowledge of this deen. As we mentioned yesterday in the khutbah, we should all be striving to be students of this deen, learning the meaning of Quran from the earlier sources, from the teachings given to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, and passed down to the scholars of today. We have to make sure to keep our intentions purely for the sake of Allah, not let anything mix with that intention. In regards to seeking knowledge of this deen, we have to know that if we seek this knowledge, the knowledge of deen, for any material gain, then we will never be successful. That Allah will not even allow us to smell the fragrance of Jannah, which you can smell 500 years distance from paradise. But if you seek the knowledge of this deen for some worldly benefit, or to be able to argue with the scholars or debate with the scholars, then it will not be accepted of us. So make sure that we keep our intentions purely for the sake of Allah. In fact, this was one of the greatest struggles of most, if not all, of the scholars. They will always tell us that the most difficult matter that they had to deal with was making sure to keep the intentions purely for Allah's sake. So always ask why we do something. Someone texted me today, I want to go overseas to study. The first question that I asked was why? You see, because if you're not sure of your intention that it's being solely for the pleasure of Allah, then you could possibly fall into grave error. And of course, another of the requirements of Istiqama is to perform the deeds of our deen, to perform the acts of worship and the amal salihat in accordance with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and avoiding the innovations. It has been stated that the shaitan smells the heart of the believer and then he tests him. One of the early scholars stated that for every deed, shaitan has two forms of evil incitement. Either he will encourage him to be lazy, or he will encourage him to go beyond the limits. So, from among the means to attain Istiqama is turning to the Quran. I know all of us have a great appreciation for the companions, the Sahabi, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we study their lives, we gain a great appreciation of this great blessing that was sent down to the Prophet and the fact that they witnessed the sending down of the Quran. And we have to know we were not chosen to be the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We were not worthy of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose those companions specifically to witness the sending down of the Quran, to live it, to demonstrate, to put it into practice, and to spread it all over the world. While we cannot be companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we surely can be companions of the Quran. We can be companions of the Quran, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, "Aqra'u al-Quran, فَإِنَّهُ يَأْتِي يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ شَفِيعًا لِأَصْحَابِهِ." To recite the Quran, for it will become on the day of judgment an intercessor for its companion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make the Quran come to life as a young man who will stand like an attorney for us before Allah, begging for our forgiveness, asking Allah, Ya Allah, have mercy on your slave who memorized me, who committed me to memory, who practiced me, who lived by me, who taught me to others, who recited from me, who read from me. Have mercy on your slave who did these things. So we want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us to be companions of the Quran, inshallah ta'ala. We must continue to engage in the practice of muhasabat, of taking account of ourselves. As our Amir al-Mu'mineen, Umar ibn Khattab said, to take account of yourselves before you are taken account of. And just like the Prophet has said, every day, every day, the person begins his day doing one of two things. To either set his soul free, or to bring about his ruin. Every day the person begins as a vendor of his soul. You see, so we have to take account, just like the business person. At the end of the day, he checks his books and makes sure that the cash flow is correct, that his merchandise is in order, so he can remain in business tomorrow. Well, we have to be the same way with regards to our souls. We should go to bed at night. We should ask ourselves, what did I do to help the cause of Islam, to help the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What did I do today to become a better Muslim, or to help someone else become a better Muslim, or to help someone else to come to Islam? We shouldn't wake up in the morning without saying what we have been taught to say. Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'da ma amatana wa alayhi nushur. Praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for raising us up from death, back to life after we were dead, and to whom we will be gathered, and to prepare to spend the day in a way that is pleasing to Allah, that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to take account of ourselves before we are taken account. We have to engage in the practice or the discipline of tarbiyah and tasfiyah, and tazkiyah. That is to engage in rigorous training, religious discipline, studying the deen, and applying the deen, not just acquiring the knowledge just for the sake of knowing something, but putting it to practice. Half of knowledge is applying it, putting it to practice, and then making sure that we are sifting the information so that we have the correct information and not anything that would be from innovations or from any other things that may be foreign to Islam. We have to constantly be striving to purify our hearts, because this is what the Prophet ﷺ has been sent, to purify the human being, to purify us so that we will be pleasing to Allah. We must constantly engage in dua, and the essence of worship is dua, as the Prophet has said. Ad-dua huwa al-ibadah. The dua is the essence, because dua, alhamdulillah, you can make dua virtually at any time. And we have from the Prophet's example himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he made dua for almost every occasion. You see? So we should constantly keep our tongues and our lips wet with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah has said in the Quran, those who believe in Allah and in whose hearts find complete satisfaction, mutma'in, in the remembrance of Allah, for indeed the remembrance of Allah is where the hearts find true satisfaction. We should engage in the constant and continuous study of the life and seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions, and also the earlier prophets. And we must stick close to the Jama'ah, stay close to the Jama'ah, the Muslims. Even if there's only one person on the sunnah, on the haqq, that is the Jama'ah. If the whole Jama'ah is off on innovation, and that one person who is upon the sunnah, who's sticking to the Quran, sticking to the authentic sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is the Jama'ah. And we have to stick to the Jama'ah, alhamdulillah. We must constantly reflect on the akhirah, the rewards and the punishments of the akhirah, inshallah ta'ala. And we must have husnul dhan. We must have husnul dhan, that is great expectations, anticipation and great expectation of Allah. Constantly thinking good about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He indeed will fulfill His promise, alhamdulillah. And finally, we must engage in the art and practice of da'wah, of calling, inviting others to this way, sharing this deen with humanity. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah will make us be among those who will be on Istiqama. With that, bring our short talk to a close, and I ask Allah's forgiveness for my mistakes and shortcomings. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. If there are any questions, we can have to answer the questions that you may have. And Jazakumullah khairan for allowing me to visit with you this weekend. I pray that Allah will have made this a beneficial visit for all of us. And inshallah ta'ala, I have good memories of my first visit here to Tucson. And we hope to meet you again, inshallah ta'ala. Not in this life, in Jannah to Firdaus. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.